My name is Jacquie Cotillard, your host and operator. Welcome back. Our object lesson for today comes in the form of 2 albums out of the heart of Sweet Wreath Records in Birmingham, and I will quantify them respectively. The first, Mr. Sweet Whisper, features the words and voice of poet Johnny Coley with our quasi-lounge impressionist jazz nightmare band, Worst Spills. It's funny. Somewhere along the line to press, we got renamed the Mr. Sweet Whisper Band. You might have heard of us. Heard us just now. Emphasis on might. Our friend Jasper Lee releases this and other music on his Sweet Wreath label and plays a wonderfully located vibraphone in this case. Thanks to Iron City Percussion for that loan. Thanks also to Mississippi Records, a label that has been protecting and preserving outsider and other rare music for over 20 years, and in turn picked up Johnny's work to send it out way beyond our reach. We're incredibly grateful for that. There's more of Johnny's work on the Sweet Wreath Bandcamp for your perusal. Subscribe to Jasper's Sweet Wreath newsletter, by the way. It's excellent. We'll be back to talk about more of that sometime. I play sax and some sparse organ on Mr. Sweet Whisper, which was a heady treat. The voice and context and content came later in Johnny's apartment after we'd laid down all the music. We sat with him with some headphones and watched him improvise all of this, which was wonderful. A bit later on this month or the next, I'll be speaking to Jasper about his experience doing all of this, so keep an ear out. If you're listening on our podcast feed, you will have heard Cafe Roma off that album earlier, and at the end of the interview, you'll get another cheeky tune from Mr. Sweet Whisper. During our breaks, we'll take quick swipes at tracks from Humdeath, the second album in question. I believe that stands for Hermeneutic Urinologist, my dead evangelical aunt's tombstone hawker. Or something else. I like it a lot. You can get that album early, December 22nd at 8 p.m., as we embark the stage at Saturn, Birmingham. We're going to bring to life some of the works by Johnny, but also a few of the numbers from Humdeath. I'm very excited about that. You can get that album there on CD, in person, or wait until early January when it releases on digital. So to briefly preview the stage, first are going to be the voices of local deep earth choral group Mother Harmony, filled with friends. Then Worst Spills are going to play in the middle, followed by Flusnoix, our well-loved and documented improv collective from Montevallo. You can hear interviews and music with them in previous episodes as well. With a bit of overlap betwixt us all, we're going to join Mother Harmony for a number that leads into our set, and then we're going to take a little break, and then everybody join Flusnoix on stage for a good old-fashioned group improv. I love those. It's going to be a magical evening. Join us, won't ya? Now, by which I mean next, we'll be spending some time in conversation with the maestro behind Worst Spills and many other groups that I and the Earth Hotel have enjoined over the years. Joel Nelson, our confrere in Portland, Oregon. Joel has been a longtime contributor to the avant-garde and experimental scenes from Montevallo and Birmingham to Oakland, California, and onward. He has toured nationally with his group of collaborators Silica Gel, whom you can hear on a previous episode along with Johnny Coley, as well as Ghost Food with Birminghamian Paul Wilm, and numerous ensembles on the West Coast. Thanks to him for providing the instrumental improv that became the invocation music for episode 114, using a specialized instrument called a crank synth that he plays out there in the Oregon. Crazy cool. Our interview ended up taking on a weird kind of thematic quality that resonates greatly with what I've been moving through and what I wrote about before and after the fact. That's why they pay him the big bucks. Media appearances from Joel Nelson aren't cheap, you should know, and you can take it from me, and it's worth every crew grand. That's his rate. That is what is known as his fee. So that's next, talking to Joel after this brief message from the pig. Hey, Joel.
Hello.
Organic opening.
We're
Hi.
back again.
Somehow
After how many years?
we returned. It's been 3 years in a couple of days here. 3 years and 3 days hence. We were actually both on the last thing because that was the Throbbing Gristle. That was just when I happened to put that set out.
And I'm glad you did. I don't think anybody else captured that, really.
I'm glad we got halfway good takes of everything.
Yeah.
It unnerves me still. I go back and listen to it sometimes, and I scare my own face off.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because so much of that music is scary. I mean, it's a real, I can't listen to it all the time because I'm not in the mood for it. But when I first heard it, it is scary. It is a ritual, nightmarish kind of music. I think we did our job.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever felt like I did my job more or better or more exactly. We went up there and did exactly that. We didn't say anything to the audience at all, I don't think. Did the 5 or 6 tracks and then left.
And that really we did, and I think that that's like a true spirit of experimental music, avant-garde. It reminds me of the like early David Lynch painting videos that he did, where it's just those faces throwing up black goo, and it's just this haunting alarm sound, and like the senses are just terrified. And we played at this like Halloween thing that's mostly kind of hokey. I mean, everybody does some kind of like silliness, which is fine. We actually did the opposite of that.
Yeah, for people outside of the know, Saturn, the venue in Birmingham, hosts a thing every year for Halloween, the Scarier Face Off Fest. Bands from around town each choose an artist, and you cover songs for sort of Halloween theming. I think Earl Sweatshirt was on the bill. There was a Kiss band that did the costumes, and it's a lot of fun. It's very in the spirit of Halloween, but we did it more in the spirit of like nightmare. So maybe that's where I want to start. I wanted to ask specifically about your nightmare jazz term that you've coined.
Right. So yeah, that was the approach. I just thought it was a funny term. First of all, nobody had used it, and everybody comes up with their own version of what jazz should be all of the time. And so I thought it was very much in the spirit of that, and very much in the spirit of this is our music and how we play it. There's a lot of records out there of that like interpret jazz how they want. The big reference that everybody picked up on, it seemed like, with the Mr. Sweet Whisper album was to David Lynch and Angelo Badalamenti, that Thought Gang record that they made, where they were telling scary stories and adding their version of like jazz to that music, and it was very inspiring. Also Lounge Lizards was a big inspiration, even though they're more straight ahead technically. But I guess at that time it was like very punk and rebellious to just be, let's just make our own version of this music.
Right. The first record were Spills, and then Hum Death, which is the one we're putting out concurrently. Worst Spills and Hum Death are what Worst Spills are like in my head, and what they've always been like, are these angular figures that gesture at jazz, but it's a take on what people think of jazz. For me, Mr. Sweet Whisper is a departure from what we normally do. We are kind of a band in two places. We're two bands at once, dressed as another guy or something.
Exactly. It is totally that. Yeah, it's interesting. The more traditional stuff is a reflection of a newer version of what Worst Spills has become. Mr. Sweet Whisper is the most, and funny enough, it's the most tame and most digestible by probably the most amount of people. That's the thing. Hum Death is the leftovers. It's all of this stuff is leftovers of being inspired by the Bay Area and the experimental music that I was getting into at the time. The music of like Roscoe Mitchell and Anthony Braxton, and how they fractured a lot of like, they took jazz, they took classical music, experimental music, avant-garde, free jazz, and mixed all that stuff together, made their own languages. And I realized I could do that. That like, you can take all of these little bits of things and start putting them together. And then the most important part for me that I realized is the people that you get to come play that music and how they interpret it. You can search this stuff on the internet so easily now. I mean, you could be like, hey, I want to learn an Anthony Braxton score. You can go do that and start interpreting it, which is great. But to make something unique, it's more of how like taking these ideas, these rippy bits of ideas, and bringing them to people who've never really played around with them. So that's all I mean when I say that like we are these people that don't play jazz. Well, that's not really true. It's kind of like, because we all know what it's supposed to sound like. I mean, obviously, it like the Mr. Sweet Whisper record sounds like a jazz record. That's what they said, anyways.
You might as well say that you and I right now are people that don't think about hopscotch.
Yeah, right. And maybe that's just the spirit, the art spirit kind of thing of like you take all of these recipes and you mix them together, and it's the people that help you cook it then makes an interesting result. And that's kind of how I like to approach things. That's how I've been approaching things for years. I mean, not necessarily that I was aware of it, but I'm more aware of it more than ever now, and I'm far more confident in writing music. I think writing this music that has structures that people can exist in, and then what they do inside of that is kind of what makes up the music. Because I'm finding that people who've been playing for a while, most people are comfortable with lots of different genres now, and they'll kind of just if they're interested, will take up the mantle and like really add their own style to the music, add their own flavor to it, add their own interpretation to it. So, which is way more fun to play this music. All these like being inspired by metal and like grindcore in the Bay Area, and trying to interpret that in Alabama, and then taking that and then cutting it up into, and which ultimately led to Hum Deaf Me. Then cutting that up digitally and reworking it into a new song that then we go back and reinterpret if we were ever going to play it live. That's kind of like the last process.
Yeah, from a player's perspective, I don't think there was much of a discussion like, this is our metal song. Even if you gave us references, we were discussing musical gestures more than we were trying to take on any character. You don't seem to feel any need to force the back end into something. We're really free to keep going around that circle. You don't seem to have an end goal in mind at first.
I don't. I really don't. That's what's fun, and it's a little awkward, I will say, I think, for everybody. It's especially hard for musicians that are not comfortable with open improvisation. And I mean that very specifically, because there's plenty of jazz musicians and other people that improvise, but open improvisation is very different, because it is that awkward thing of like, it's just an idea, and I'm going to let you really interpret that how you want, and I'm not going to give you the answers. And you have to be okay with living with that kind of thing. And that also, you have to be comfortable with there being other answers that's not yours. I have to be okay with that too. You know, I'm going to give direction of like, if there's too many notes flying around in the bass and we wanted like long tones or something like that, sure. But largely it is an interpretation of this idea, and how you interpret that will make a result. I just don't think it's too different than writing a song. I'm just leaving it to everybody else to help define what that is in their own terms.
So I want to ask about open improvisation specifically. When you hear something and you're going to answer back to it, you can build on it or you can cut across it.
Yeah.
How do you know when the decision is the right decision? How do you know that you've done, kind of in the same way, how do you know that anything that I've said makes sense?
I think I have the answer to this. You don't. And it's very unsatisfying. And it's maybe the worst part about playing open improvisation. You don't know unless somebody records it and you listen back later and it's like, oh, that's good. Because I experienced that a lot. I mean, there's a lot of times I feel like this sounds horrible. And it sounds fine later, or maybe it wasn't good. I don't know. But even then, you're taking the position that nothing is wrong and that everything's a mistake and everything's correct all at the same time. There's no way to gauge that.
Right. Like in Wittgenstein's whole thing about social interaction, the sociability of communication, that somehow there is a rule because you know when you violated it or when you know that you've done it correctly. It's not quite a social interaction, open improv, but it is close. It's next to it.
Yeah. I mean, I would say at least my approach to that kind of thing is just like in conversation. I generally can have a feeling of when I need to lead something and take action, or when I can just sit and compliment something. Like, for example, if somebody's playing really loud and fast and quick, I always think it's fun to do the opposite and take it slow and play long tones underneath them. And that's purely like, that's a musical idea. That's not, I mean, and you can't really escape musical ideas necessarily. That's a musical idea that I get from like Bach. You know, the bass line in a piece of music moves slower than the melody most of the time if you're playing that music. And it seems very defiant, though. It feels very defiant in my way. I'm just like, oh, you're going to play fast and loud. I'm going to do the opposite of that. But it's really not. I mean, I don't know. But also, I don't know sometimes. And you kind of have to be okay with that. And that's the risk. That's what's so cool about open improv, and that's why people hate it, I think, so much, because it's a risk.
Entertainment's not really supposed to be a risk.
Exactly. It's supposed to be digestible and make you feel, I guess, make you feel a certain way. That's why I go back to like when I talk about bringing those pieces of music with Mr. Sweet Whisper, that it's a kind of awkward to give you this music because it's like, here it is, and now we have to decide what to do with it. And I don't really have an answer necessarily. I can come up with an answer on the spot when y'all ask me, And I try to the best I can, but I don't really necessarily have an answer because I don't know. And I'm doing that on purpose. And maybe I feel like I've gotten better at it over the years. That feeds into that spirit, and it comes from a rock and roll perspective of where bands would play together all the time too. So the idea of this music is that we're supposed to know each other really well and be playing together a lot, which is kind of true and kind of not. Interesting enough, I'm like on the other side of the fucking country. So,
well, I mean, we can just pick up and be friends again.
I know we're lucky in that way.
The common context of trust is there. That's the well-given price of entry.
Yeah, it is, and it's a respect thing too. That's another reason why I like open improv with people that I know really well. There's a mutual respect that, like, no matter where you go or what you do or what happens in this musical context, we're going to support each other and make it happen, and that's really cool. That's why I like it so much, and that's what's happening now in Portland. I've started doing this. I've just happened to start conducting a big band improv thing, and that whole idea is that it's open to anybody that we get to know. If you get invited, you can always come and play whenever we get a show. But I don't plan anything when I conduct it. It's like we are going to just make it up on the spot, and I'm going to kind of give suggestions, and people can take them or reject them or do what they want with them. And it's a huge risk, but it's fun, and I'm learning a lot about how to like conduct and work with a lot of different people on a lot of different levels, because it can be people that have zero improv experience to weathered musicians, and we're trying to like bridge the gap between all of that and help people communicate that are interested in improvisation. Yeah, I've just been doing this for a long time. It's kind of like what I've given my life over to musically, for better or worse.
And you've been a teacher for quite a while. You don't still teach, I don't think.
I have one student left. But I've taught for almost 10 years music stuff, so.
That kind of flexibility is really that central skill that bridges all the things you do, really.
Yeah, it's for whatever reason, I don't have a very defined musical role ever. I'm lucky that I get to go in any direction that I want to go in. I don't feel bound necessarily. Other than like the sheer, just like energy levels of me and other people. Like, can we get in the same room and be in a band for, longer than a month, which largely people can't, and largely I fail at that. So, it's even more, it's a special thing we have in terms of this like little community of people that are able to come together and make these records happen and make this music happen. And to be doing it so long since we went to school together in Montevallo, it's come to a head, and it's come to a very successful head. Like the last show that we're playing together is the Mr. Sweet Whisper show, and then I don't have more music for this group after that. I'm not saying I'm not going to do it, but I'm just saying it's like it's all been recorded and it's out in the world and we're done and it's behind us.
Yeah, this, by the grace of God, is going to get out before that show so people can hear it and have prep time to plan for it once they hear it, the way promotion's supposed to work. That's on the 22nd of December at Saturn at 8 p.m.
We might have a reel-to-reel version of Johnny there, but we'll see. I also have a new song that I wrote for this particular performance and for us. So. Inspired by the X-Files.
Then we have one more thing to put out. We have that bonus single, and
a bonus single, yeah.
We'll clap and dance and hee-haw on the second to drum up a B-side.
There you go.
It's the end of the year. It's the dark Yuletime. I'm crawling out from under a rock, I suppose. Everybody's scared.
Yeah.
And this is probably going to be the last of it, because I don't know how long I'm going to live in this country now. So if anything, it's going to be a transatlantic thing done by the internet if we do anything else, or maybe we can get you over there or whatever. But worse bills isn't going to do anything as a whole if it's not virtual.
I think people change, people grow, and people move on. And I think we were very lucky to be able to make the recordings that we made, to be able to be a part of Sweet Wreath, been able to be a part of like the art scene in Birmingham. Amongst the people that are curious about music in Birmingham, we're going to come up as a topic, and I think I'm proud of that. I mean, that's really a goal that we all fought for back in the day when we were young and trying to like become artists and things like that. I think we accomplished that. It's going to be messy. It's never going to be perfect, and I'm just proud of that.
And you're certainly respected by all the people that you have come into contact with, and, the people that we've played for, and the friends that... It's interesting that we came up and self-identified and self-developed in a scene of about 45 people. people that lent a hand in this or that, or came to a couple of things, or at least half of those people were in bands that we played with, met. There's all this kind of self-reflexive community, very specific time and place that facilitated it. Because without a cultural hub like Eclipse Coffee Shop to kind of, I don't know, trawl through the ongoing flow of students through there and kind of collect them and let them group together, yeah, chemical bonds break over time. You made an impact as a creative person and as a friend. And I know of friendships and relationships, artistic and otherwise, that wouldn't have existed had you or I not been the intermediary.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, just to get back to your original question about like what now, you know, I don't want to get into politics really, but like we all know what's happening. It's interesting. There is a sense of doom and gloom, but also I might be wrong by saying this, is that it's like it seems like we might be entering into a very interesting time in music, because I think a lot of the music that came out this year in 2024 was really, really good, but it feels open more than ever now.
My first knee-jerk reaction was, I don't feel open. I don't feel possibility in any sense, like in the world, personally, socially, more open as a trend. But yeah, artistically, it does feel that way. It's weird.
It is very weird. I was speaking in terms of socially, like I don't like think we are free in any kind of capacity. Like, you know, I'm
Sure.
not like naive like that. I don't think that.
No, it was me sensing the contradiction in myself.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You know.
But I do feel open artistically now, auspiciously, weirdly now.
Yeah.
I've been waiting and waiting for this kind of break, this fever to break.
I know exactly what you mean. It's very strange, you know, because I was very scared of that, like, for a long time, of just, like, how am I going to be a artist? And, like, it felt like it was always going to be taken away from me.
Because, you know, for so long, people said that that's not something you can do with your life. You know? And that's because I come from, like, a very, like, I guess you could say, working class world. And I don't blame anybody necessarily for saying that. I mean, I think there's a lot of cynicism of, like, people our age. It's different with people our age. They're like, I believe in the arts, but I'm going to be cynical about everything that is ever done or something. I don't know what that is. And it's very warranted. I mean, it's a dark, fucked up world. But it's always been a dark, fucked up world. I'm really, you know, watching and waiting for a real social change in the world, whatever that would be, for the better. But I don't really see that coming necessarily. And I know that is dark and cynical of me to say something like that. I know, but at the same time, I do believe, like people have done in the past for a very long time, no matter their identity, they've made art and made music and made things happen. And I do not think we're special in any kind of way. On both sides. I don't think it's necessarily a golden age of music. It might be, who knows? Well, and I don't think it's a dark age where there's no interesting music or anything happening and everything's bad. I think that's all the product of the internet. It has impacted our society, and we've been dealing with this for a very long time. This is like, I think, our generation's thing that we have to deal with, really, is nihilism. It's like it's so easy for us to invest in that and just say, fuck it.
I think it's very easy for the intense plurality that the internet provides to just exacerbate the nihilistic tendencies that are already in our cultural tendency, the West and all of its scare quotes, of trying to form a conception of the world from the outside, from an outside viability. It's a question that is almost being begged by the internet. Does music still exist or have a place? Do people still want it? It's always been self-evident, self-creative. The character that we have now of, and we were talking about this on the phone the other day, doing what we did, essentially, forming small, not insular, but really flexible communities of particular terms of engagement. Because all of the people in Montevallo that we crossed paths with, and when we went to Birmingham and when you went to Oakland, the motivation to do music, the thing we had in common was that we all took it for granted that this is something that we wanted to do, which seems like an oversimplification, like that's too obvious to say, but the thing that we did of finding small communities that bond over their engagement with art in general instead of their genre of art. The fact that we could stack bills of 4 different bands of completely different stripe and everybody just enjoyed that. And Eclipse being the way that it was, free shows, you get a cut of the bar and food, and with no door charge, there was no barrier of entry. Shows happened every week. The open mic night that was attended and well put on, mediated a little bit. All of that stuff really just shows it is a third place where it has to happen, but they need nothing more than an excuse and a place to do it.
Yeah. It's just a nudge or something. Just somebody just saying that this is possible right here at this time. And not to brag on myself, but I feel like I'm pretty good at that.
Yeah, that's part of the central skill that I mentioned earlier, the flexibility of you got to incorporate all these perspectives. Place is kind of how we do that.
Yeah, and I don't know what prompted that. I don't know if it was me growing up the way that I did. I mean, I didn't grow up I grew up in rural fucking Alabama. I don't know what that is, but I still have it to this day of seeing all kinds of different people. I see the potential for them to create something with music, because that's my skill. I can work inside of music. And I don't know what that is,
It's certainly not cynicism.
Yeah, no, and I cherish that. I hold on to that. It's very close to me, and I nurture it, and I keep using it. But it's awkward and clumsy. It's like, being vulnerable with somebody, and that's hard. And I've gotten more, but at the same time, I've gotten more guarded about it and sharing it with people, because I've been burned and used and taken advantage of by it. But also, I've gotten better at it and being more specific and in ways of bringing people out of their shell, out of their darkness and depression too. That's still true to this day.
It is. This is the only social engagement that I've felt safe doing for the last year or so, because we get, like, I saw Jasper and I haven't seen anybody. I'm not going to get too much into that, but having this safe excuse to be somewhere, have a thing to do that is going to produce something that I feel good about was really a scarcity for all these different reasons.
Yeah, exactly. And like, you can have all those reasons and still come and do this thing and like feel like you've projected yourself out into the world in a positive way. Like, what the fuck? And I'm not talking about like some hokey ass bullshit. Really engaging with a group of people that you have come to trust and making something that you think is worthwhile, I think is still interesting and still powerful and can change things. It's all the things that these social movements, these political movements, all this stuff that they claim that they want and they talk about wanting all of the time, but can't get to at all.
I mean, a lot of it's winning engagement. It's winning the engagement of, I don't know, music does so much to, I don't want to say mediate, because mediate has so much authoritativeness in it, but music has that capacity to give space to not just it's not about expression so much, it's about the feeling of doing it. It's the feeling of successfully doing it. It's a communal feeling generator.
It's like you have this idea that you're working towards, but also you have to compromise. Like, the idea of listening is a compromise. You have to really take time to be like, what are the sounds that somebody's playing, and like, how do I identify with that in terms of all of the things I've absorbed in my life? It is a freedom to have an identity of any kind. The interesting part about that is that you might have to listen to somebody you don't necessarily agree with or identify with, or we don't even really live the same lives. It's a nice place to come and share, because it is a language that isn't controlled. It's this, if everything's always two-sided, at least in the art world, it's like you say it one way, but really it can be expressed another way. And living in that contradiction is how I like to work.
You mean in a polar kind of way, not in like a black and white thinking kind of way.
Right.
The balance of the opposites, like you were saying with Bach.
Yeah.
I want to just kind of throw this thread out for future consideration so I can come back to this thought. We could very much interpret improvisational group music as cooperative decision-making that's done on an individual level that doesn't have to be pragmatically tested against any objective group form. In other words, the music doesn't have to come out any particular way. And really, anybody playing it and anybody listening to it is already building in the assumption that the product is going to be something that isn't necessarily worth listening to, but will be listened to. I'm going to hear this. I'm subject myself to hearing this. whether I choose to have value in it or not after the fact, whether I choose to think it's good or bad or whatever. So we have a group dynamic that's based on constant contextually updating decision making. The music place where that happens is a zone where this constant intangible opportunity to make decisions is there. You get a feedback loop of my decisions make sense to me, change, get reevaluated. And we don't get a lot of those, especially not totally dominated by spoken language, is what I wanted to pin down or put a pin in and leave it behind.
Yeah, that's a whole other... Oh, God.
Yeah, we could spend the next 3 hours on that.
Yeah. I mean, the things that come to mind is like, in terms of zone, in terms of place. Yeah, because then you get on the topic of freedom. Because, what's the difference between playing under a bridge with a group of people and in an art gallery?
From experience, not a whole lot. Risk.
Yeah. But are you more free under the bridge or in the art gallery? It certainly would be better, probably more organized, potentially, if you were in an art gallery. But you'd be less free because probably somebody's curating it and deciding who gets to play or not, as opposed to playing under a bridge where you are probably completely free, but you're also playing under a bridge where you're subject to any sort of environmental violence. The wind, finding power, people can pull over and throw shit at you, or the cops will probably be called. So you have that excitement in there, and that like anything can happen. But in an art gallery, it's pretty prescribed. Like if somebody's going to an art gallery, they're like, "Oh well, let's go see some weird shit happen," And let's I want to go do that. Or those are the art kids doing that shit again that they do.
I think that's true in both cases.
That's true. Yeah.
I wanted to touch on briefly the Hum Death record because we spoke about it some. I wanted to bring attention to the cover. I'm glad that Juliana's cover got to I saw that painting years ago, and finally it gets to live on this thing, and it's this record. I'm glad it wasn't the first one.
I can't believe she indulged my insanity so much. So.
I know. I just wanted to ask what the southernness, because we started this whole thing by talking about transplanting these ideas that you were taking in the Bay Area. But you've always, and Johnny definitely does, I think Jasper does too, with a lot of stuff that Sweet Wreath does, there's a southernness about it. It doesn't avoid a dialogue with the problematic aspects of southernness. We're not dealing in any of that conversation, though, with this art, but we do acknowledge it along the way.
Sure.
You were talking about working class experience in the South, and we've talked tangentially about Hammer and Hoe before, and that's really a character. A lot of emancipatory or abolitionist movements here, a lot of working class movements in the South are like, yeah, we're Southern. That means working class. That means standing up for people of color and standing up for. We can extend that. What is the Southernness about in this work? The Southernness of Worst Spills. And how is that kind of in dialogue with what is the nightmare? What is the jazz nightmare?
Yeah, what is the southernness about the? I mean, I think it's on a shallow level, and it's not bad. It's purely regional. If we were just going to strip away everything, we're literally from a place because it's a narrow lens, right? Whereas with what we're doing, we were painting a picture of something that's just a part of our lives. We have no control over where we're from, and I'm not in control of how people look at this world, but we're all aware of it, and it's still. And I'm sorry, I don't see a difference in what's happening in the South necessarily. What's happening here in Portland, it's conservative values being imposed on the majority of the population everywhere.
Correct. The power entrenchment, I think, is really the difference. The structural,
yes,
the way history is baked into the laws and the small towns and how that stuff functions.
Yes.
But I'm sure, Washington's like that.
Yeah.
Oregon's like that. Idaho, Northern Idaho, is a real problem.
California too. They're not innocent, And so I guess I'm bringing all of this up is just kind of contextualize like where we are and what it means to be in Alabama and in Birmingham. And I think being a part of the telling the story in a different kind of way is important. Yeah. And I think Johnny Coley tells that story in a different kind of way. I mean, we have gotten with this music, with Hum Death, with the art that Juliana made, the way that Johnny Coley speaks and writes poems and things like that, his ability to give you a place and then introduce the eerie and the weird.
Yeah.
And he's really good at that. And so we've taken that and that spirit and kind of planted it in a place that has it has extremes. Because like what we talked about, it has extremes that are buried. Not only are there like extreme movements have happened there in the South. I mean, just, from the civil rights movement, it was the place of agriculture and slavery in an intense kind of way, in a feudal way that the country benefited off of. It then had a communist presence in Birmingham that's largely buried. Nobody tries to talk about, but people from other parts of the country were looking at Alabama and the communist and political and socialist movements that were springing up out of this area.
Before my great-grandfather helped stomp them out.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so you have this place of like where these extremes kind of butt up against each other in a place where the majority is oppressed by the minority in a big way through redlining and things like that.
Right.
You can really see how like diverse Birmingham is, but also you can take pride in a lot of the fact that it is so defiant there. There is a defiance, a creativity, and a joy that I miss about the South. And then you go out to the surrounding areas and just how like cut off it is from the rest of the world. People take pride in that. It's that thing of like it's all falling apart around us, but we're going to still do what we're going to do anyways.
Yeah. I fear there's a lot more distraction now than when you left. I wanted to gesture at Jess Marie's conversation years and years ago when she and I talked, because she's in Flusnoix. She leads Flusnoix that y'all started. Flusnoix is going to be we're all going to be performing with them at the Johnny Coley show to close. So I wanted to gesture at that. But also, she just mentioned the Southern Gothic nature of Flusnoix's work. I think of this whole conversation as there's a Gothic element, but the new kind of Southern uncanniness of having to live with all this tension, opportunity, resistance, all the things we've kind of discussed. There is a very Gothicness. Our ruins are different. You could definitely look at Sloss Furnace as a ruin.
Yeah.
There's no water here. There's no river here.
Yeah.
It is just based on the hill. So yeah, there's a lot to be said there.
I think so. I mean, you kind of got to it. It's like, it's an extreme darkness, but we need to still, no matter what, have some sort of empathy with each other. And really, it is having some sort of faith in something. I'm not religious necessarily, but having a faith. That's
what solidarity is.
Yeah. It needs to happen. And it is going to be contradictory and not perfect and pure. And it's not going to be the perfect logic. And it's not going to make all the sense all the time. And it's not going to be all the things that logic should be. It's not going to look like that at all. But I'm going to just engage with it and be with it. And I think that's a very Southern thing, because nobody is coming to help you.
Well, now we're in the third spot. What did you have for me?
I'm curious what you, James, and Ryan all have thought about being in Worst Spills, because we are at a point where I'm not saying that it won't be a band anymore, but it will be very different how we work if we ever make music again. So as a person who has put up with making this music, I basically would fly into Birmingham and turn on the bat signal, and y'all always showed up. I'm just curious, like, not necessarily why, but like, what are your thoughts? How have you felt? Good, bad, ugly, opaqueness, hopelessness, all of that. And I'm just curious, like, what's your take on it? Because, I have my perspective and my beliefs and, all these ideas that y'all have put up with that I don't think have always necessarily been completely thought out. Or even I've had the ability and language skills to express what I'm looking for, But you've all done it and hung in there and made it happen.
I mean, that's always been part of the fun. I think I could, in this part, speak for the two of them. It's been a privilege to just get to do it. The fact that we got paid by a record label to put anything out is just fucking, it's all gravy, baby. I don't think James is for it in the money. He might be in it for the sex. But I think he's mainly in it just for the art of it, for the fun. That was a joke. I don't know if any band has gotten anyone laid less. But yeah, Ryan has always been down to clown. I could ask the same of y'all. Like, why did you play weird shit and then covers with me at any excuse that we could come up with? It's just because, well, yeah, that's what we're doing. I've learned a lot trying to get better at communicating ideas. The process that we've had, especially between you and me and Jasper in the last two projects, the last two things. The first two were Spills albums. As Sweet Wreath took them on, the more I've gotten to work with Jasper, the more I just enjoy being a part of a communicative group. When I went to his place to record the vocals for this album, the Hum Death album, I was aware of being intensely uncomfortable as a person, but also very safe to just let that come through. Mm-hmm. And it does on the recording. I think there's a character to the decisions that I made of just what to say or what to put on. Lyrically, it's a weird album because there aren't really lyrics and it's barely ideas. But I just got a lot out of you and me and him sitting down on speakerphone and discussing how we wanted to do that. That was just like, okay, I'm back. We're making decisions. And that's been the most valuable part of the endeavor all the way through, is just we get to do that. We get to do it at all. I don't know. And that's not a cheap answer to me, because the character of what we got to do was exactly what we wanted to do.
Yeah.
I've certainly been in contentious creative relationships where it seemed like every decision was getting agonized over for no reason. So it's something I try not to take for granted, the ease with which we can. Even the 4 or 5 passes that we made on mixes and decisions to get this finalized and then the masters, it's never been a burden to try to find time to do that or mental space to do it. It's always been like a positive thing. So maybe not as interesting or complex an answer, but definitely a one that I'm pleased with. It's a play kind of feeling. I know Jasper does a good deal more work. Like, there is more labor that Jasper has to put into it and you than me. It's a treat, babes. Don't know what to tell you.
That's what I want it to be, because it's like, I think that makes interesting music, because y'all can just come and play.
That's the best part of it, is it's not shit afterwards either.
Yeah, that's true too, yeah.
That's a bonus. I thought about this quote. I woke up this morning and thought about this. The less talent they have, the more pride, vanity, and arrogance they have. All these fools, however, find other fools who applaud them. And I just thought, what a fucking thing to say by a guy named Desiderius Erasmus. Yeah, you would have something like that to say. I've seen that band.
It's true. I don't want to put a complete cap over it, but we are good at improvising together.
Yeah, I don't think it's just navel sniffing that we think it's good to listen to. It's nice to have the validation of other people, but yeah, I'll listen to it and I feel something from it.
And I mean, not to put all the pride on this review, but we got Pitchfork, which is they're like pop. They review pop music. I mean, if you saw the best of album listed, it was all rap and pop music, and then there was fucking Mr. Sweet Whisper.
Yeah, it's not like we got Pitchfork. It's like we got Pitchfork. What?
I know.
Yeah,
I know. It's weird. It's very weird. And that we were literally practicing Nightmare Jet. We were really improvising, having quick jump cut changes that we were doing, and being as extreme with form as you possibly could be. That first Worst Spills record is a good example of that, and we practiced that a lot. Whereas it moved into this realm of it was more opaque ideas, and I wanted to do more studio cut up stuff. With form.
With Hum Death, you mean?
With Hum Death, yeah. And then leading to the Mr. Sweet Whisper album, it's more refined, improvisation of us playing, and we're just good at doing that together. I think we do have a talent of improvising together, and it's entertaining, and it's funny. What's the last track on the record?
Dancing Like Assassins.
Yes, that was totally just done out of humor.
Yeah, what do we got? Last minute, last 10 inches of tape or whatever.
Let's make a fun dance Latin tune thing.
Yeah, I think you said conga line.
Yeah.
Conga line's like jazz. What the fuck? That's not even a simulacrum at this point. It's just a nonsense thing. It's like a tiki bar.
And the way Johnny interpreted it, it's this dirty, it has a dirtiness to it. He's had to be a stripper to make money or something. It's just very cartoony. Oh, in a way that's
Yeah.
dark but interesting.
Dancing like trained assassins, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've done a lot of reflecting here.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever came before this was pretty reflective, so I don't want to spend too much time on this, but thanks for coming back. Thanks for being a part of this thing again. You were
Yeah.
here since the very beginning, the very first night of any of it. And every time I reopen a season after some fitful gap, I'm like, Joel,
Let's do it.
you can be here. Like, you're the one that needs to be here.
Yeah.
To pick it back up. So I appreciate it. You were just down after so long of trying to, I don't even, so many things could be said about what I was waiting for.
Everybody needs a different amount of time to deal with things, and just how they ended up, I should say, relating to the world. And I don't think that should be the death of the art that you make and the things that you work on. Even if it wasn't the Earth Hotel coming back in any way that it might. I just don't think you should be, at least amongst my friends, I don't think y'all should be just completely dead and all of that. Because, I mean, just to put a bow on top of this, look at what we've done, and I think we're good at it.
It was a huge encouragement.
Yeah, I really believe in everybody. I really do, and I think it's fun, and y'all inspire me, and you give me dreams and hopes that we can keep making things. That's all. And so I'm excited to see what you'll do with the Earth Hotel. And I thought the Earth Hotel has always been a very creative, very interesting perspective and project that you've that's been a part of your life. It's as much as it's like almost your own like child and personality that is like attached to you, and you let live and die at different points. And I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I did indeed let my child die for a little while. Yeah, I don't know. It's funny because I spent so long trying to write a good introduction that would get said what I felt needed to be said in order to reestablish context or connection. And having written so much about it and discarded so much, now I have nothing to say. I said it in 4 pages, and now I have nothing to say to your face about it. I don't have a good excuse for disappearing.
I know this is off topic. This is out of left field, but you said you had nothing to say, and I think it's funny that I'm not necessarily comparing you to Jack White at all, but Jack White just released this record called No Name, and it seems like he's at a similar place. He just gave up. I don't know what to say anymore. I'm just going to go do what I do best. I'm going to make a blues rock album, and it's really good.
Yeah.
For what it is. I mean, it is a nostalgia trip for me because I liked the White Stripes when I was younger. And, like, it's not anything that's going to blow the universe apart and, like, change the world. But he went back and just did what he was good at.
Yeah. I mean, the single off that album is a huge alternative rock hit right now, where alternative rock hit doesn't exist.
Yeah. And it seems like for so long he's been trying to, like, redefine himself and, like, be this, like, thing that... I don't know, and it's come off very strange, I feel like, from what little I've listened to and been engaged with. But
see, I've followed all those albums, all of his work since he went solo, except for the acoustic, and I haven't listened to the acoustic one because I'm still kind of processing the electric one. But it's interesting that it was like the third thing that he'd done of this electric band cut up. He's done a lot of editing work, a lot of like building sounds up instead of using the White Stripes methodology of defining what sounds are going to be used, a lot of like effects and tape manipulation and, unconventional band setups or whatever. I can identify with the need for someone whose artistic process is so internal, but has to live so loud, to have to run that circle and kind of do your own work a few different ways in order to have those oppositional markers. Like you were talking about the polar kind of needing to oppose, I put it that way, but I can see his need to run that interpretive circle to process his own distance from himself. I can see him trying to turn around and get free by stopping at every point around the circle and looking at your opposite and saying these things cancel each other out. It's a way of purifying in a kind of way without discarding anything, without disvaluing anything. Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the White Stripes methodology was so much about intentional restriction, and you can really see him slowly, begrudgingly, but intentionally remove those self-imposed restrictions. There's a track on, what is the album called? Fear of the Dawn, I think is the Jack White album, where he samples William Burroughs saying, "You cut into the present, the future leaks out." And I thought that was such an interesting find on one of his albums. I don't know, there's something really auspicious in that. It was a complete surprise. The Coming of Night, the cover of Darkness, stuff like that. You cut into the present, the future leaks out. I don't know. We've gone tangential now.
Yeah, I mean, he's an interesting character. It feels like things are getting more focused for people, even though they don't have a name for anything. He's not the first person to name that album. I also like Godspeed You Black Emperor, and I keep up with them. They're an instrumental rock band. And they also have an album that says they don't have a name as of this date. That's the title of the album. We do not have a name as of this date. And it's a whole record that they finished. And people just don't have I mean, even we've been talking about this whole time. We don't have a name for this anymore. It's like, so it's folded in on itself and been just churned up so much. We don't have a name for this, but at the same time, we're doing it and making it happen. And like, these interesting things are coming out.
Yeah. There's something there about letting this thing that we can't name find itself by our doing it. It's wonderful that all of the turmoil and drama that I put myself through internally doesn't have to last. It changed and it made things different. But then now that things are changed, it doesn't have to stay. It was just part of the process.
Right. And hopefully the path is a little more clear.
We're down to our last minute of free time.
Yeah. I think we got it, right?
I think we got it. It's there. The Earth Hotel is a production by Jacquie Cotillard, the individual and named collaborators. All contents included are done so under fair use and with permission. The ideas and opinions expressed here not necessarily reflect those of Jacquie Cotillard, the Earth Hotel, or associated parties, nor do they reflect those of guests or contributors prior or future. All music, words, and otherwise not cited as authored elsewhere are creations of Jacquie Cotillard and remain the intellectual property thereof. Unauthorized use is strictly prohibited. The Earth Hotel, all rights reserved, 2014, updated 2024.